The year was 1877, and the desert stretched endlessly beneath a molten sky, where heat shimmered off the rocks like a spirit that refused to die. Dust and memory lived in that country, the kind of land that tested a soul, stripped away comfort, and showed a person what they were truly made of. It was into this merciless expanse that Evelyn Hart came, her pale Boston skin already freckled from the journey west, her heart still half tethered to a world of lace curtains and soft hands. Evelyn had come to the Arizona Territory to take up a post as a school teacher at a new settlement called Fort Claiborne, a crude collection of shacks and tents built on the edge of Apache lands. The settlers called it a beacon of civilization. The locals, both soldier and settler alike, called it a fool's dream in a godless desert. Evelyn only knew it as her last chance to start again, away from the empty parlor and the memories of a fiancé buried under Massachusetts snow. The journey west was long and hard. She rode with a small wagon train, traders, a few families, and a pair of men who called themselves guides but looked more like gamblers escaping debts. Every mile carried them deeper into silence. The wind grew dry, the color of the world turned red and gold, and even the stars at night seemed sharper, as though they could cut through the dark. On the fourth night, as the sun sank behind the distant mesas, Evelyn sat beside the campfire, writing by the flickering light. She wrote in her journal, "The desert has no mercy, yet it has a strange beauty, like a truth one cannot look at for too long." She didn't notice the two riders watching from the ridge above. They came without warning, as raiders often did, shadows on horses, swift and soundless. The crack of gunfire tore through the camp like thunder. Screams rose, wagons toppled, and in an instant the air was thick with smoke and panic. Evelyn ducked behind a broken wheel, her heart hammering, her breath caught between prayer and disbelief. One of the raiders, his face painted with streaks of ash and ochre, seized her arm. She fought, clawing, striking out with desperate strength until a deeper voice called out, not in English but in the harsh musical syllables of Apache tongue. The man froze, released her, and stepped back. From the shadows rode a tall warrior, his black hair bound in leather, a necklace of bone resting against his chest. His horse, a pale gray Mustang, moved with the grace of smoke. His eyes, sharp, calm, and dangerous, met Evelyn's. She had never seen a man like him. He carried the weight of command without speaking a word. Around him the other warriors lowered their weapons, murmuring his name, Nantan Lobo, chief wolf of the Red Mesa band. He dismounted, his moccasins silent in the sand, and studied the trembling woman before him. Evelyn's bonnet had fallen away, her hair tangled, her dress torn at the shoulder. She met his gaze despite her fear, refusing to look away. The desert wind blew between them, hot and dry. He said something to her in Apache, a question perhaps, or a warning. She couldn't understand, only caught the sound of his name again. Nantan. "I don't understand," she whispered, voice shaking. "Please, I mean no harm." He turned to the raiders behind him, barked a few sharp words, and the men rode off to gather supplies from the overturned wagons. He looked back at her, then pointed toward the desert horizon. His meaning was clear. Go. But her ankle throbbed, and when she tried to stand, pain shot through her leg. He frowned, crouched down, and examined the injury. A sprain, not a break. Still, she could not walk. He hesitated, then lifted her effortlessly into his arms. Evelyn's breath caught as he carried her toward his horse. The scent of leather and smoke clung to him, and his heartbeat, steady and strong, echoed against her ribs. The man said nothing, not even when she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Perhaps he did not know. Perhaps he wondered the same thing himself. They rode through the night, the moon painting the desert silver. When dawn came, they reached a hidden valley, a cluster of stone dwellings carved into the cliffs. Smoke rose from small fires, and dark-eyed children watched in silence as the chief brought the pale stranger into their midst. Evelyn's mind swam between exhaustion and disbelief. She was alive, but she was not free. The women of the tribe took her inside a low dwelling and tended her wound. They spoke little, though one of them, an older woman with silver hair, murmured softly, "Nantan's will. You safe now?" Safe. The word felt strange here, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate her kind. Over the next few days, Evelyn began to see the rhythm of life in the village. The Apache were not the bloodthirsty savages the settlers had described. They were proud, skilled, and fiercely loyal to their own. The children laughed. The men hunted. The women wove baskets with patterns that told stories older than any book. Nantan Lobo kept his distance. She saw him only from afar, standing on a ridge watching the horizon like a hawk. But she could feel his presence even when he wasn't near, like a storm waiting beyond the mountains. On the 5th evening, he came to her tent. She rose quickly, unsure whether to thank him or fear him. He studied her with that same unflinching calm, then pointed toward her ankle. It had healed enough for her to walk. "You go," he said in rough English. "East, white people." The words stung. "And if I don't?" she asked quietly. He tilted his head slightly, a flicker of amusement or confusion in his dark eyes. "Then desert take you," she smiled bitterly. The desert nearly did. For a long moment he said nothing. Then almost gently he touched the scar on her wrist where a wagon splinter had cut her. His hand lingered a heartbeat longer than it should have before he drew back. "You have fire," he said simply. "I'm a school teacher," she replied. He gave the faintest smile. "Then teach the wind." The next morning she awoke to find a small bundle beside her bed. Water, dried meat, a piece of woven cloth. A gift. Or perhaps a farewell. As she limped out of the dwelling, she saw him waiting by his horse. He motioned to the horizon once more, but this time there was something in his gaze that unsettled her. Not hostility, but concern. She nodded, mounted one of the ponies they offered her, and turned her back to the village. For a long time she rode in silence, feeling the desert breathe around her. Vast, unending, alive. When she glanced back, she saw him still watching from the ridge, his figure small against the sunrise. It was the last she would see of him for many weeks. But even as the settlement came into view that afternoon, and the soldiers hailed her survival as a miracle, she could not forget his face, or the way the desert wind had carried his name like a promise. Nantan Lobo, the wolf of the Red Mesa. She did not yet know that her path, and his, had only just begun to intertwine, bound by the wild heart of the frontier and a love neither of them yet dared to name. Evelyn Hart was back among her own kind, but her soul remained in the desert. Weeks had passed since she had been rescued by the soldiers of Fort Claiborne, and yet the memory of that night still haunted her. The raid, the eyes of the Apache chief, the silence that said more than any words could. She had expected nightmares. Instead, she dreamed of wind in her hair and the low, steady rhythm of a horse's gait beneath her. The settlers treated her like a ghost returned from the grave. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Hart," the commander had said. "Those savages rarely spare anyone." She nodded, said the proper words of gratitude, and went about her work. But inside she felt a strange ache, not of fear but of something left unfinished. Her days as a teacher began quietly. The schoolhouse was a one-room shack of raw timber and cracked windows, its floor dusty, its benches uneven. The children came barefoot, shy and curious, sons and daughters of farmers, soldiers, and drifters chasing promises that never seemed to come true. Evelyn taught them to read, to spell, to count, but often, when she looked out the open doorway and saw the desert stretching endless beyond the fort, her mind drifted elsewhere. To him, she tried to bury the memory of the Apache chief beneath her lessons and her letters home. But the desert, it seemed, had a way of whispering what the heart refused to forget. Then came the fever. It started in late August, when the air grew thick and the wells ran low. One by one, the children of the settlement fell ill, coughing, burning with heat, their breaths shallow and desperate. The army doctor, overworked and undertrained, did what he could, but supplies were scarce. Fear spread faster than the sickness. On the 3rd night, Evelyn sat beside the bed of a little girl named Anna, the child of a rancher who lived along the dry creek. The girl's skin was hot to the touch, her lips cracked. Evelyn wiped her brow with a damp cloth and whispered, "Hold on, sweetheart. You'll be fine." But her voice trembled with doubt. By morning, 3 children were dead. Desperation drives people to strange places. When the doctor muttered that no more quinine remained, Evelyn remembered a tale one of the older women in town had told, of an Apache plant that could break fever if boiled properly. She had dismissed it then as frontier superstition. Now it felt like her only hope. She didn't tell the commander or the other settlers. She simply packed a small satchel, took a horse, and rode east, toward the red cliffs where she had last seen him. The journey took her 2 days. The heat clawed at her skin and the wind stung her eyes with dust. But something inside her had some stubborn spark that kept her moving. On the second night, when the moon rose over the desert, she saw a flicker of firelight against the distant rocks, the Apache camp. When she approached, the guards were on her in an instant, silent, swift, their bows drawn. She raised her hands, breathless. "Please," she said, "I don't come with soldiers. I come alone." A murmur ran through them. Then a deep, familiar voice said something in their tongue, and they stepped aside. He emerged from the darkness. Nantan Lobo, every bit as she remembered him, tall, composed, his eyes glinting like obsidian in the firelight. His expression was unreadable as he took in the sight of her, the pale schoolteacher covered in dust standing before his people once again. "You," he said slowly, as if unsure she was real. "Why you come back?" She swallowed hard. "The children in the fort are sick. I need a plant. I was told your people have medicine for fever." He studied her in silence. The fire cracked between them. "You think I give you this?" he asked. "I'm asking," she said, her voice steady. "Not demanding, please." He turned to one of the elders, spoke briefly, then faced her again. "You stay tonight. Go back tomorrow." Evelyn wanted to protest, but she was too tired to argue. A woman named Mira, with kind eyes and strong hands, brought her food, roasted corn and smoked meat, and showed her a place to rest. The camp moved around her like a world apart. Men sharpening knives by firelight, women tending small children, laughter rising from the shadows like music. They were not what she had been told to fear. Late that night, she awoke to the sound of quiet footsteps outside her shelter. Nantan stood there holding a bowl of steaming liquid. He motioned for her to sit. "This," he said, pointing to the herbs floating in the bowl, "is what you want. For fever. You boil, drink little." She looked up, her eyes soft. "You're giving it to me?" He nodded once. "But go alone. Desert is hungry this time." "I've been through worse," she said, attempting a smile. "Maybe," he replied. "But you not know how far the wind can lie." He rode with her the next day, guiding her along narrow trails and dry riverbeds. They spoke little, but the silence between them felt alive, full of questions neither dared to ask. At sunset, they reached the edge of the valley where the fort lights shimmered faintly in the distance. "This is where you stop," he said, handing her the small pouch of herbs. She hesitated. "Thank you." He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "You are brave, white woman. But brave is not always wise." "I know," she said softly, "but sometimes it's the only choice." He almost smiled. "You talk like no other white woman I meet," she laughed, in a small, tired sound. "And you're not what I expected either." For a long moment they simply looked at one another, two worlds colliding in the stillness of the desert. Then she turned her horse toward the fort. "Evelyn," he called suddenly. She stopped, looked back. "Desert, remember you. Remember that." She nodded once, then rode into the night. When she returned to Fort Claiborne, the doctor scoffed at her Indian remedies. But Evelyn brewed the herbs anyway and gave them to the sick children herself. Within days the fever broke. Those who had been near death began to recover. Word spread, and the same settlers who had whispered that she was too strange, too soft, now called her a miracle worker. But not everyone was grateful. The commander pulled her aside, suspicion in his eyes. "You went into Apache land, didn't you?" "I went where the medicine was," she said simply. He frowned. "You're lucky they didn't kill you. You don't trust those people, Miss Hart. They're wild, dangerous." Evelyn looked past him toward the red horizon. "So is this land," she murmured. "And yet it's still beautiful." That night, as the campfires burned low and the desert stars hung silent overhead, Evelyn sat by her window, the wind whispering through the cracks. She thought of Nantan, his steady voice, his calm strength, the strange gentleness that had lingered in his touch. The world said they were enemies. Her heart whispered otherwise. And as she drifted to sleep, she wondered if the desert wind carried her name the way she still heard his. Autumn came to the Arizona territory like a sigh. Softer winds, cooler nights, and a golden haze that made the mesas glow like embers at dusk. Yet even as the desert seemed to rest, the frontier never truly slept. Soldiers drilled, ranchers drove cattle across parched ground, and whispers of Apache raids drifted from campfire to campfire. For Evelyn Hart, the month since the fever had been quieter, but not peaceful. She taught her students as always, kept her head down when soldiers spoke of Indian trouble, and tried to ignore the way her heart quickened every time she looked east, toward the red mesas where she knew Nantan Lobo still watched over his people. She told herself that their paths had crossed only by necessity, that what passed between them, the look, the silence, the unspoken, was nothing more than gratitude and curiosity. But the human heart is a wild thing, and no amount of reason can fence it in. It began again one evening in late September. Evelyn had just dismissed her pupils when she heard the sound of hooves outside. A young Apache boy sat slumped on a tired pony, blood staining his sleeve. The settlers shouted in alarm. Some reached for rifles. Evelyn pushed through the crowd before the soldiers could react. "He's hurt," she cried. "He's just a boy." The commander ordered her back, but Evelyn stood her ground. "If you harm him, I'll report it to the governor himself," she lied, voice trembling but steady. The bluff worked. The soldiers hesitated long enough for her to lead the boy inside. As she cleaned the wound, the child whispered a name, one she hadn't heard in months. "Nantan," he gasped weakly. "Say bring you." Her heart stopped. That night, when the camp slept, Evelyn saddled a horse and slipped out of the gates, the desert swallowing her whole. The stars burned cold and bright above, and the horizon stretched like a promise she couldn't refuse. She rode until dawn, when the mesas rose before her like red temples against the sky. He was waiting for her. Nantan Lobo stood beside a small fire, his expression unreadable, his presence commanding as ever. When she dismounted, his gaze flicked over her, half in concern, half in quiet rebuke. "You come," he said softly. "You sent for me," she replied, her breath still quick from the ride. "Your boy was hurt." "Yes, you save him." His tone held no question. "You ride far for one not of my people." Evelyn looked out at the land around them, the canyons, the cacti, the endless sea of gold and rust. "Maybe I'm not sure who my people are anymore." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward a nearby path. "Come, I show you something." They walked through the narrow gorge until it opened into a hidden valley. Below them, dozens of Apache families were camped near a stream, their horses grazing, their children playing beneath cottonwood trees. It was a sight few white settlers ever saw, the heart of a people living between survival and extinction. "This is all we have left," Nantan said quietly. "They call us raiders, thieves, killers, but we only take what the land once gave us. Soldiers come, burn homes, take children." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "I've heard the stories, but never like this." He turned to her. "You believe what you see?" "I believe what's in front of me," she said. For the next few days, she stayed among them, helping the women grind corn, tending to the sick, teaching a few curious children to read English letters scratched in the dirt. At first, the tribe kept their distance, but when one of the infants grew feverish and Evelyn stayed up all night nursing the baby with herbs and cool water, something changed. The women began to smile when they saw her. The children brought her small gifts, feathers, stones, and flowers gathered from the canyon. Even Nantan's warriors, once wary, began to nod in respect as she passed. Each evening, Nantan came to her fire. They spoke more now, haltingly through broken English and gesture. She learned his people's word for wind, for fire, for dream. He learned hers for trust, for sorrow, for love, though neither dared to say the last aloud. One night, as the desert cooled beneath a pale moon, he told her of his youth, how he had been taken once by soldiers, kept in chains, then escaped to lead his people north. Evelyn listened, her heart breaking at the quiet pain in his voice. "You must hate us," she said softly. "I hate no one," he answered. "Hate is for the weak, but I remember." She reached out, fingers brushing his hand. "And do you remember me?" His dark eyes met hers, steady, searching. "Every night," the words hung between them, heavy and sacred. They might have stayed that way forever, lost between two worlds neither fully belonged to, but fate has a way of testing fragile things. On the 5th morning, a rider arrived breathless from the south. "Soldiers!" he cried in Apache. They come? Scouts near the canyon. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She knew the army had been mapping Apache trails, but this was worse. If they found the camp, it would be a slaughter. You must move, she urged. They won't show mercy. Nantan's jaw tightened. We go north before sunrise. But if they come now, we fight. Let me go back, she pleaded. I can warn them away. Tell them this place is empty. His eyes flashed. No, you go back. They take you. They use you to find us. I can help, she insisted. They trust me. He stepped closer, his voice rising like thunder. You live in their world, not mine. You cannot walk both paths. Evelyn's heart pounded. Maybe I already do. Silence fell between them. The air grew tense, heavy with all the things they could not say. Finally, Nantan turned away. Go, he said coldly. Before the wind changes. She hesitated, tears burning her eyes. Is that what you want? He didn't look back. It is what must be. With a trembling breath, she mounted her horse and rode from the canyon. She did not see the pain etched across his face once she was gone, nor how his hands clenched as though trying to hold back the desert itself. When Evelyn reached Fort Claiborne 2 days later, her heart was torn in two. She reported nothing of the Apache camp, only that she had been traveling to collect herbs. But already the soldiers were preparing to move against Nantan's people. She heard it in their talk, a punitive patrol to teach the savages a lesson. That night she sat at her desk, her journal open before her. The candlelight trembled as she wrote, I've seen the truth. They are not savages, only souls driven to the edge. And Nantan, he carries more honor in silence than most men do with guns. She stopped, unable to write more. Tears fell on the page. She whispered his name into the night, hoping the desert wind might carry it back to him. Far away in the Red Canyon, Nantan stood beneath the stars, looking toward the horizon. The wind moved through the cliffs like a spirit's breath, and though he could not hear her voice, he felt it all the same. A whisper caught between two worlds neither of them could escape. The sun rose red over Fort Claiborne, a warning painted across the sky. The soldiers called it a good omen for battle, but to Evelyn Hart it looked like the desert itself was bleeding. The fort was a frenzy of preparation. Men loaded rifles, saddled horses, and packed ammunition carts. The commander, Colonel Briggs, stood by the gate barking orders. We ride at dawn tomorrow, he declared. Intel says the Apache are massing in the canyon north of Red Mesa. We'll strike first and end this once and for all. Evelyn's heart froze. She knew that canyon. She had stood there only days before, watching the sun pour gold into its walls. She had heard Nantan Lobo's voice echo through it, calm and proud. And now the army meant to turn that sacred place into a killing ground. That evening she went to the colonel's quarters. Sir, she began, keeping her voice steady. You can't attack. There are families there, women, children. Briggs looked up sharply. And how would you know that, Miss Hart? I heard it from a trader. She lied quickly. He gave a short, humorless laugh. You've got a soft heart, teacher. That's your trouble. But this isn't charity work. Those people raided supply trains, killed settlers. That's not true, she said, stepping forward. You don't know what drives them. You don't see how they live. Briggs slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You forget where your loyalties lie. Evelyn swallowed hard, the words burning her throat. My loyalty is to what's right, Colonel. His expression turned cold. You'd best remember who feeds and protects you, Miss Hart. Stay out of this or you'll find yourself out of a job. Or worse. That night she lay awake in her cabin, torn between fear and resolve. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains, carrying the smell of dust and gunpowder. In her mind, she saw the Apache children laughing beside the stream, the women grinding corn, Nantan's quiet smile as the firelight caught his face. If she did nothing, they would all die. Before dawn, Evelyn packed a small bag, water, bread, and a pistol she barely knew how to use. Then she slipped out through the supply gate, the guard too drowsy to notice one lone woman riding into the dark. She rode hard across the desert, chasing the rising sun. The wind whipped her hair loose, the dry earth stung her face, and the ache in her chest grew with every mile. She reached the canyon as the morning light crept over its rim, bathing the red stone in gold. The Apache camp was already stirring. When they saw her galloping toward them, shouts went up, half in warning, half in disbelief. Nantan Lobo stepped from his lodge, his expression a storm of surprise and anger. You, he said sharply, striding toward her. Why you come back? They're coming, she gasped. The soldiers, maybe 100 men. You have to leave now! A murmur rippled through the camp. Warriors reached for bows, mothers gathered their children. But Nantan stood still, his jaw tight. You bring them? He demanded. No, she cried. I came to stop them. He turned to his lieutenants, speaking in Apache. The men argued. Some wanted to run, others to fight. Evelyn stepped closer, desperate. Please, Nantan. I swear on my life I didn't lead them here. He looked at her, eyes dark and unreadable. Why you risk your life for us? Because you saved mine, she said, voice breaking. Because I can't watch them destroy you. Silence fell. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then slowly his anger faded. We move, he said to his people. Take children, go north. The warriors scattered, gathering supplies, driving ponies into the brush. Nantan turned back to her. You go with them. You be safe, I'm not leaving you, he frowned. You stay, you die. She met his gaze, her chin trembling but unyielding. Then I die beside you. For the first time, something like fear flickered in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. Stubborn woman, he muttered under his breath. Before he could speak again, the first gunshot cracked through the canyon, then another. The soldiers had arrived. The Apache warriors formed a line across the ridge, firing arrows and old rifles. Smoke rose, screams echoed, and the air filled with chaos. Evelyn ducked behind a boulder as bullets ricocheted off the stone. She saw Nantan mount his horse, his voice ringing through the canyon as he shouted orders. The soldiers pushed forward, their rifles flashing in the sun. Evelyn ran from cover to cover, helping pull wounded children into the caves. A bullet struck the rock beside her, showering her with dust. Still, she kept moving, refusing to stop. Then she saw him, Nantan, surrounded by smoke, fighting like a spirit carved from fire and fury. A soldier raised his gun behind him. Without thinking, Evelyn screamed, Nantan! And hurled herself forward, pushing him aside as the gun fired. The bullet grazed her arm. Pain seared through her, but she barely felt it. He caught her before she fell, eyes wide with shock. Fool woman, he growled, his voice shaking. You bleed for me? You saved me once, she whispered. It's only fair. The battle raged for hours, but the Apache fought with the desperation of people defending the last of their world. When the smoke finally cleared, the soldiers retreated, beaten, bloodied, and humiliated. The canyon was quiet again, except for the low moans of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. Evelyn sat beside the stream, her arm bound with a strip of cloth. Nantan stood nearby, staring at the setting sun. You should not have come, he said at last. She turned to him, her face pale but steady. If I hadn't, you'd be dead. He faced her then, the wind tugging at his hair, the light catching the scars on his arm. You defied me, he said slowly, almost as if tasting the words. She smiled faintly, exhaustion softening her tone. I suppose I did. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, his voice low and rough. You turned your back on me once before. You left when I told you to stay away. But now, he reached out, his hand brushing her cheek, his touch both fierce and trembling. Now you defy me again. Her breath caught. Would you have me do otherwise? His eyes burned with something between anger and longing. Defy me again, he whispered, and I will never let you go. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The canyon, the smoke, the sorrow, all fell away. There was only the wind and the two of them, standing on the edge of everything they had ever known. Then, slowly, he drew her into his arms. For the first time since she had come west, Evelyn felt something like peace, and not safety, not certainty, but the wild, trembling peace that comes when a heart stops running from what it was always meant to find. When the stars rose over Red Mesa that night, their light fell upon a land forever changed, and upon two souls bound not by blood or law, but by the defiance that had saved them both. Dawn crept soft and gold over the Red Mesa, brushing the canyon walls with light. Smoke from the battle still hung in the air, thin and gray, like the ghost of what had been. The soldiers were gone now, retreated south with their wounded, leaving behind the broken silence of a land that had seen too much blood. For Evelyn Hart, the world felt both fragile and eternal in that moment. She stood by the stream, washing the dust and blood from her hands, her arms still bound in cloth. Every muscle ached, but her heart beat steady, alive. She looked across the water and saw Nantan Lobo, standing on the ridge, tall and still as the stone around him. The morning sun caught his profile, sharp and proud, and for the first time she saw him not just as the Apache chief, but as the man he truly was. The last of something noble, something untamed. When he came down to her, his steps were slow, deliberate. "The soldiers go," he said. "For now," she nodded. "You drove them away. You saved your people," he shook his head. "Not saved. Only delayed the end." His words were simple, but the weight in them pressed heavy on her heart. "Then we'll rebuild," she said. "You always do." He gave her a long look, his dark eyes softening. "We rebuild, yes. But you?" He paused. "Your place is not here. The soldiers will come again. They will look for you. They will not forgive." Evelyn swallowed hard. "And if I don't go?" He turned away, gazing toward the horizon. "Then you live as one of us. You forget your world." "Maybe my world forgot me already," she whispered. He said nothing. The desert wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and sage. Somewhere nearby a child laughed, a small clear sound amid the ruin. Life, stubborn and defiant, was already beginning again. For days Evelyn stayed with them, helping tend the wounded, teaching the children songs to keep their spirits high. The women welcomed her now as one of their own. They called her Tse-Na-I, Stoneflower, for her pale strength and the way she refused to bend. At night she sat with Nantan by the fire. They spoke little, but the silence between them was full of everything they could not say aloud. Sometimes, when the wind grew cold, he would drape his blanket over her shoulders and their hands would brush. It was enough. But peace in the desert never lasted long. One evening, a scout returned breathless from the south. "More soldiers," he said in Apache. "They bring cannon. They will burn the canyon." Nantan rose without a word. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. "You can't fight them again," she said. "You barely survived the last attack." He met her eyes. "Then we move north, to the Black Range, hard land but hidden." "I'll go with you," she said. He frowned. "You cannot. I won't stay here and wait for them to find me. If they do, they'll use me. Against you. Against your people." Nantan studied her a long moment. The firelight danced across his face. Finally, he said softly, "You would leave all behind, your home, your blood, and for this?" "For you," she said. The words hung in the air, trembling, alive. He closed his eyes briefly as though the truth pained him. Then slowly he reached out and touched her cheek. "Then you are no longer white woman," he said. "You are of the desert now." That night they began their exodus. The camp moved silently through the canyons, men, women, and children leading their horses, carrying what they could. Evelyn walked beside Nantan, her skirt torn, her hair tangled, her heart light despite the danger. They traveled for days through the wilderness, across dry washes and narrow passes, through forests of pinon and juniper, where the stars seemed close enough to touch. Each night they camped beneath the open sky, and each night Evelyn felt herself slipping further from the world she had once known. One evening, as they rested near a stream, she found Nantan sitting alone, sharpening his knife. The firelight played across his features, strong, solemn, carved by time and wind. "You don't have to keep fighting," she said quietly. "You could find another way, peace maybe." He gave a small smile. "Peace is not given. It is taken, same as freedom. And love?" she asked softly. He paused, then looked at her. "Love is like desert rain. It come when least expected. It stay only if earth strong enough to hold it." She felt her breath catch. "Then I'll be the earth," she whispered. He set the knife aside, stood and stepped toward her. The wind moved through the trees, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then his hand found hers, rough against her smooth skin. "Then we both learned to live in the storm," he said. That night, under a sky thick with stars, he kissed her. Not with haste, but with the quiet reverence of a man who had waited his whole life to touch something sacred. In the days that followed, the Apache found refuge in the northern hills, hidden from the army's reach. Life became simple, hard but honest. Evelyn helped the women plant seeds by the river, gathered firewood, and tended to the children. She learned their songs, their language, their ways. To the settlers, she became a ghost, the schoolteacher who vanished into the desert. Some said she'd been taken. Others whispered she'd gone mad and wandered off. Only the wind knew the truth. Years passed. The war between the settlers and the tribes slowed, then faded. The fort at Claiborne crumbled into ruin. And still, deep in the heart of the desert, people spoke of a white woman who lived among the Apache, a woman with sun-browned skin and fire in her eyes, who taught their children to read, who walked beside their chief as his equal. One summer evening, a group of traders traveling through the Black Range stopped by a distant river and found an old couple sitting by a fire. The man was tall, his hair streaked with silver, his gaze sharp as ever. The woman beside him smiled softly, her face lined by sun and years, her eyes bright with the same stubborn spark. "Is it true?" one of the traders asked. "You're the teacher who went missing? The one who turned her back on her own?" The woman's smile deepened. "I turned toward where my heart led me," she said. The man beside her reached for her hand. "She defied me once," he said in a voice still rich with command. And again, the traders laughed, thinking it a jest, but when they looked closer, they saw the truth in his eyes, a love that had outlived war, distance and the world's judgment. That night, as the traders rode away, they looked back one last time. The fire still burned, two figures sitting close, the desert wind whispering through the canyon, and if one listened carefully, they might have heard his voice, deep and low, carrying across the night, "Defy me again, and I will never let you go." The wind took the words and scattered them across the mesas, into the endless silence of the land, the same land that had once tried to break them both, but instead became their home. For Evelyn Hart and Nantan Lobo, love was not something found in comfort or peace. It was born of defiance, forged in dust, blood, and fire, and carried in the heart of the desert forever.